There I was experiencing a beautiful summer day in the middle of Oak Island, which is an island off the coast of North Carolina. Beautiful, beautiful beach. My family and I, we were on spring break, and a lot of my cousins, my grandparents, we all stayed in this beach house right on the beach together. And like most kids who are at the beach, they want to do some sort of activity, right? Is there anyone in here who's like, when I go to the beach, I just want to lay around? Does anyone just do that? Okay. That wasn't me. I wanted to do activities. So a lot of my siblings, maybe they were building a sand castle. Maybe they were burying one of our cousins and making him look like a mermaid in the sand or whatever. I always thought that was a little weird. Some of them were throwing Frisbee. But me, not me. I wanted to be more adventurous. I wanted to be different. So I bought a little raft from the store that was probably meant for like a 5-year-old, and I pumped it up, and I got an oar at the store, and I started rowing out like Moana into the waves. And my goal was I wanted to make it past the waves. I thought I was Christopher Columbus or something, but because on the other side of the waves, I saw there was like still peaceful waters. I'm like, man, that would be so relaxing. I'm going to get past the waves. I'm going to get to the peaceful waters. And when I get there, I'm just going to relax. I'm going to take it easy. So I'm rowing, and that was really difficult to get past those waves. I mean, I got knocked over 3 or 4 times trying to get past those waves, and finally I made it. And I get to the calm waters. My parents must have been nuts because I was like 300 yards off the beach or something crazy. And I'm just like in this little kiddie raft, laying down as a 14-year-old. I'm just like, relaxing, like finally, the calm waters. And I closed my eyes. I heard the seagulls. I heard the fresh breeze. I felt the sun beating down on me. And it was just so peaceful. I heard the sound of the crashing waves. And I had my eyes closed. I just remember I was relaxing. But then I got this feeling that like the blood was rushing to my head. I was like, what? And I opened my eyes and I look, and I guess I had drifted off for so long that I was drifting towards the waves again. I wasn't paying attention. And when I opened my eyes, my feet were up in the air and my head was down towards the bottom. And you know how like a wave can hit sometimes and you kind of go over the top of the wave? That's not what happened to me. Like the wave crashed perfectly on me where my raft was like straight up vertical in the air and it flipped me over. And I remember I tumbled like 3 or 4 times underwater. I was like, what is going on? And next thing I know, I'm like a baby seal washed up on the beach. I'm just like laying there. I'm like, what is going on right now? But what I want us to see in this story is that waves are powerful. Everyone say, waves are powerful. You weren't in sync with everyone, Kurt. No, I'm just kidding. It's all right. So, waves are powerful. I think all of us, who's ever done this? Maybe it was at a wave pool at Holiday World or on the beach with your family where you've like linked arm with your friends and you're like, all right, soldiers, come on, let's see if we can withstand the waves. And you all like stand together. Have you ever done that where you try to brace yourself and see if you can like take on the onslaught of waves coming towards you? And sure enough, usually you'll like maybe get through a couple waves, but if you stand there long enough, if you don't jump, like some people cheat and they jump when the wave hits. No, you gotta try to actually see if you can withstand it. You'll get knocked backwards after a while. It's because waves are powerful. Waves in your life. We're talking about hypothetical waves in your life that could affect you. Maybe your family moved away or you recently moved here and you don't know anybody. You're like brand new to this area and it's really difficult because you left all your friends and everything you've known behind. Maybe a wave or a storm in your life is not making that team that you worked so hard all throughout the summer trying to make this team, and you go to the tryouts and you get cut from the team. You don't get to be on it. It could look like an argument you got with your best friend or an argument you're having with your parents and things at home are just tough right now. Maybe it's a bad breakup or you had a close family member pass away. Waves are times in our life. When I'm talking about waves, I'm not just talking about physical waves. I'm talking about storms and waves in our lives are times where life is difficult for us. And what do we do when these bad things happen? Jesus' closest friend, his name was Peter. We talked about him several weeks ago. One of Jesus' best friends, he was in a situation where he was going through some tough storms and some tough waves. And this story is found in Matthew chapter 14. And Jesus has just finished up doing this big miracle called the feeding of the 5,000. Who's ever heard of the feeding of the 5,000? Okay, so there's this crowd of 5,000 men and their families. So it's more than 5,000. It's 5,000 men and all their wives and their children. So just thousands of people. And they're hungry. They're listening to Jesus teach for so long, and Jesus is doing all these miracles, and they're there for so long that they're getting hungry, right? And then Jesus says, The disciples are like, man, they're getting hungry, Jesus. What are we going to do? How are we going to feed 10,000 people? And Jesus says, what do we have? And this little boy has two fish and some loaves of bread. And Jesus says, give this to them. They're like, do you want us to cut this up into like microscopic pieces? What do you want us to do? And Jesus says, just trust me. And they start handing it out, and somehow it's multiplying. They're like, what in the world? They reach it. He said, put it in the basket. And when he reaches into the basket, like a magic trick, like a magician pulling something out of a hat, they are able to feed all of those people with just those items. So it's just a crazy day of miracles happening. Like Jesus is showing himself so powerful. He's proving he is who he said he is. And then finally, it's towards the end of the day, and this is what Jesus says. He tells his disciples, hey, it's time for everyone to go home. So disciples, go ahead and get in the boat. And they're kind of teaching on a beach. So they're like, get in the boat, and you guys head off to the other side of the lake. I'll meet you there. I'm going to send everyone home. And Jesus is like, all right, guys, it's been great. It's been fun today. Everybody head home. And they go out onto the waters. And here's what happens when Jesus sends them off to the waters. It says, verse 22. So if you have your Bibles, we're in Matthew 14, verse 22 through 27. We'll read it together. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. And after he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountain by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone. And the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. So that's a storm. And shortly before the dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. This is crazy. Walking on the lake. And when the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. They said, it's a ghost. And they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. Now, I just want to stop really quick and just recognize how abnormal this story is. So Jesus sends his disciples out on the lake, and he's basically sending them into a death trap. He sends them out in the middle of a storm, and the boat is just going crazy on the waves. And they're like, Jesus, why did you send us out here on the storm first off, okay? And we're fighting for our lives out here in the waves in our little fishing boat. But then to make things scarier, Jesus is just like decides, I'm just going to walk out to them. And he's walking on the water with his Jesus powers, okay? He's walking on the water towards them. And if I was in the middle of a storm and I saw a person walking towards me, I would think it's a ghost too. I would be scared out of my mind. And they don't believe it's Jesus. And Jesus is like, it's me. And the disciples are like, I don't know if I believe you. And Jesus says, who else can walk on water, bro? And then they say, okay, if it really is you, Jesus says, you want to believe it's me? Peter, one of Jesus' disciples, get out of the boat and walk to me. And Peter's like, I don't know. I'm not Jesus. And Jesus is like, I'm going to prove it's me. Walk out to me. And Peter's like, I don't know about this. And I could tell this story, but I want to kind of show you a picture of this story because I want you to kind of get in your memory what this might have looked like, okay? So there's this show called The Chosen. Anyone know The Chosen? Chosen's a really cool TV show about Jesus' life. It's pretty solid. They obviously, like any TV show, they do change some stuff, but for the most part, it's pretty solid. And they depict this story of Peter walking out to Jesus on the water. And I wanted you to check this out just to kind of see what it might have looked like. So that's a picture of what it may have looked like. And in the show, they kind of added a little bit of different element going on where Peter is going through both the physical storm and waves, but it's reflected of a real kind of situation in his life that feels like waves and feels like a storm. And we see him kind of playing that out with Jesus on the waves, and that symbolism is literally taking place in front of him. And he's asking Jesus, why are you putting me through this? Why are you making me go through this storm in my life? And he's not even talking about the physical storm. He's talking about the storm going on in his life that like maybe you and I have. And this is what Jesus says to him. He says, it's to test our faith. It's to build our faith, and it's to help us to learn to trust him and strengthen our trust and our love for him. And though the waves were crashing all around him on every side, as long as Peter kept his eyes on Jesus, he was able to walk above the waves. And I think the same is true in our lives. If we are able to keep our eyes on Jesus and stay linked to him and to focus on him and keep our eyes on him, even though we go through storms in life, we're able to stay above the waves, and Jesus is going to see us through those difficult circumstances and situations. But did you notice when he sank? When did that happen? It's when he took his eyes off Jesus. It's when he started looking at the waves and the storm around him. And maybe you felt like you've been sinking for a while now. And maybe it's because you've had your eyes on the circumstances of your situation, the wrong that somebody has done to you, the bad thing that you did, or the sin that you struggle with, and you're looking at all these waves and these storms around you in your life, and you feel like you're sinking. And all the while, Jesus is standing there with his arm raised out saying, hey, just take my arm. Just take my hand, and I'll pull you out of that sinking water that you are in. But we're too busy looking around. Jesus is there. God says in the Bible that Jesus is with us in the storm. We see it time and time again in Scripture. Jesus is there with us, reaching out his hand. But are we too busy looking around at those people who have hurt us? Are we too busy looking around at the mistakes we've made, or the anger or the sadness or the emotion that we feel, or the depression or the anxiety, that we ignore Jesus who's standing out right in front of us, wanting to pull us out? Do you focus on your situation more than Jesus? And that's hard for me, guys. When I go through tough times in my life, it's hard for me to keep my focus on Jesus. I'm too busy looking like, oh my gosh, I feel like this house is burning down. How do I look at you, Jesus, when there's just so much crazy stuff going on in my life right now? How do I do that? And usually when hardship happens, there's one or two things you can do. Imagine, have you ever seen a fork in the road where you can either go one or two directions, but you can't keep going straight? You got to make a choice, whether you're going to left or right. Most of the times when people go through storms and they go through waves, they choose, oh, okay, I'm going to go away from God, or I'm going to go towards God. I'm going to pull away from God because, God, I feel like you're abandoning me. Things in my life are difficult right now. Why are you doing this to me? You must not be real, or you don't care about me. And you turn your back on God and you run away. Or the other choice is you could turn the other way at this fork in the road. You could say, Jesus, like Peter in this video, he clings to Jesus, says, don't let go. Please don't let go of me. That is the other choice when you go through storms. You cling to Jesus and say, Jesus, please help me. See me through. Don't let go of me. And you cling to Jesus for dear life and seek him to see you through. And I can honestly say to you, there's been different times in my life I've went through storms that I've done both of those things. There's been times in my life where I went through a storm and I was like, God, why are you doing this to me? And I left him. But I didn't realize I was leaving the one thing that I needed more than anything. And there's been other times in my life I've done this right, where I have gone through a storm and things in my life were really difficult. They really stunk. But instead I clung to Jesus. I said, Jesus, help me. It's those questions, right, where we're like, why, God? Why are you allowing this storm in my life? Why are you allowing these waves in my life right now? And those are the questions that a lot of atheists think like, oh, well, that's why people stop believing God. They say, why God? It doesn't look like he's there, and they leave. But I found in my life, it's the moments where I say, why God, are the same moments why I need God. Don't catch this. It sounds similar, but it's totally different. The moments in your life that you say, why God, are the very same moments that I say, this is why I need God. Because when I don't understand, that's when I need him more. But so many people run away from God when they don't understand. But Jesus is saying, you might not understand, but just stay with me. And I'm going to have great plans for your life. You might not understand right now, but don't run away from me when you say, why God? No, cling to me. Stay with me, and I will see you through, and I will change your life, and I will use you for great things. And then he says this at the end of the video. I love this. He says, keep your eyes on me. Keep your eyes on me. Because when you do that, everything changes. I got one more story I want to play. This is our last week of Break Trail, as we've been talking about leaving our normal everyday avenues of life and going into, it's the idea of kind of going into the wilderness, but it's like breaking trail from our normal idea of life to spend time with God and to experience him in a new way. We got one more wilderness story from someone on staff here at Eastside, and she has a really powerful story to share about a time in her life where she lost focus on Jesus and she felt like she was sinking. But when she looked at Jesus' eyes, everything changed for her. Let's check this out.
So when I was a freshman in high school, I went in just really on fire for the Lord. I was ready to go, was trying to be patient and just waiting on God's call on my life. And as my freshman year went on, I just found myself really doubting a lot of things and asking a lot of hard questions about my faith. And I didn't really feel like my community was ready to listen to a lot of the questions that I had. And so as a result, I ended up just kind of shutting my mouth and not wanting to talk to anybody at all. I started going through some harder things, started having a lot of anxiety, starting to really struggle with who I was, and a lot of that was reflected in my grades at school. So as my grades kind of started to fall a little bit, I also started to fall. And it took me a really long time. I was probably a senior in high school, had some more stuff happen with my family. Again, just really didn't feel like I could talk to my community at church about any of the things that were going on. And then I was actually at a, not a CIY conference, but a similar type of conference to Mix or Move. And God just really woke me up, kind of like he does Peter, as Peter's walking on water. Like he just kind of snapped him out of it. He snapped me out of it. And it was just like I woke up and had a moment where I realized all of the things that I had done wrong and all the ways that I had deliberately and purposefully tried to hide from God over the last 4 years of my life. And in that moment, instead of me being met with shame and sadness about what I had done, I was met with a wave of joy because of the way that my community responded to me in that moment when I woke up and was realizing that I could rely on that community again. And so that's just my story of how I was kind of able to come back to God and come back to Jesus after a little bit of really struggling to find who I was in my faith. So during that time of my life, that darker period that I walked through, the world was telling me a lot about what made me good. Grades made me good, my popularity made me good, sports made me good. And so that drew my focus away from the Father, the Spirit, the Son, and it put the focus on the things of the world. So I guess I would just want to ask, like, what are some things that you are focusing on that are shifting you away from what God wants for you? So.
Gracie's story, when she wasn't focusing on Jesus, the circumstances in her life and the things in her life that were difficult, the storms and the waves, she felt like she was sinking. She felt the anxiety, she felt the depression, she felt all those things that she felt like, man, I'm in a storm, I'm in a battle right now. But when she was able to focus on Jesus, not that it got much easier, but Jesus helped her. And you might find that in your storm, that God might not take the storm away, he might instead help you through the storm. So we're gonna have one last wilderness time. We've been having these wilderness times, which are really cool. And if you're a first timer here or haven't been this month, what wilderness time is you're gonna get a card. Alex is passing around these cards and a pen. And I don't want you to answer these questions yet. You're gonna be tempted to be like, I just wanna answer it really fast. What wilderness time is I wanna give you an opportunity to learn this is a way you could spend time with God. This is a way, just some ideas you can have, like when I'm going to spend time with God and I break trail and leave my everyday life and spend time with God praying and in his word and pray and stop and listen for his voice, things can change in my life. So don't answer these questions yet, but there's going to be a video in a moment. And what this is, it's just a guided prayer time. And they're going to guide you. There's going to be a voice on this video. It's going to guide you through each of these questions. And I don't want you to answer the question until after the video kind of prompts you to, but I want you to pray about it first. I want you to pray and ask God about this and talk to him and think and pray and listen for his voice and write down what you feel like he's telling you. And this is really cool. I mean, I've gotten to sit in some of your groups since we've been doing this. We might bring wilderness time back every now and then. We're not going to have it every week, but we might bring it back every now and then if you guys feel like this has been helpful and helped you connect to God, or maybe even helped you in your group share what God has laid on your heart. Just an intentional way to do that. So this is our last week doing this. And for this series, so I want us to just kind of pray to seek God, and we're going to focus on two questions on your card that have to do with the story today and have to do about our lives when we're in storms and what we're focusing on. So we're going to get into this, but I just encourage you, don't just answer the questions quickly. It's about only 3 minutes, guys. It's not super long, but I just want you to pray, to seek God, and to see what his voice is telling you in these moments.
Storms in your life can make a lot of waves. Inside your troubled waters, where have you been focusing? Peter began to sink when his eyes fell off of Jesus. In the middle of your storm, how do you focus on Jesus more? In both the stormy seasons and the calm ones, Jesus is here for us. We just need to remember to keep our eyes on him.